Hey, I wanted to throw together a simple demo showing how I use my brushes to create a black and white scene. For this particular one, I figured best to stay simple, so going with two sword fighters fighting on top of a hill or a grassy knoll, something something to that effect. The way I generally think about it is like, okay, one of them is gotta be probably close to the camera, like a big foreground element, just to give the scene a little more oomph, and then another one in the background. For this particular scene, I kind of wanted, after doing some scribbles with the lasso trapping, I decided it's like, okay, I wanted the background guy to feel kind of trapped in essence. So to enforce that, the arm of the guy in the foreground with his sword is kind of weighing down on top of the guy in the background. And as the painting goes along, you'll see a bit more of how I go about achieving that. But for now, working on the background guy a little bit, and you're going to see me do a lot of back and forth painting on the background guy. He will go through many iterations, and I kind of just lay down blobby crap in the beginning of a painting. I'm not generally the type of artist who lands on the super cool thing immediately. I kind of believe a lot in you learn drawing from drawing. And so it's like, okay, you draw a crappy thing, you look at it, you see that it's crappy, then you revise it, you improve it, you make it better. And that's going to happen a lot through this painting. So again, working on the background guy, I'm going to speed up a lot of this. I play around with the composition a little bit here. It's like, what should the shape and size of things be, but still just kind of blobbing stuff down. It's like, should the guy in the foreground have arm guards? Should he not? You know? And that's all it is. At this point, I'm trying to think about movement in the painting and air. And it's like, all right, is it a windy day or whatnot? Generally, with these, you want it to be kind of a windy day. It's going to make it more dynamic. And adding wind to a scene is kind of like, if it's a night scene, putting torches or lights throughout it. So it's like, it's got to have the wind. So how do you make the wind work? It's like, well, you put blowing hair and scarves and whatnot. So this guy in the background, like, all right, we're going to put a meaty scarf on him. His clothing's going to be kind of thick and blowing through the breeze and whatnot. But as time goes by in the painting, I'm actually going to rework him so many times, you'll see, because I'm never really happy with the way he looks. Until the end, it does land in a spot that's actually I'm quite comfortable with. But his some of his stuff starts to get a little lost, and I'll fix things as I go. It's kind of just part of my process where it'll look like dog poo for a while, and the dog poo eventually gets polished enough into something pretty good. I mean, it won't be like dog poop, but it'll turn into something nice eventually. You know, it's just finding those things to improve upon. It's like with laying in the hands and it's like, all right, the hands look good enough now, but I don't actually have reference at this point for how I want the hands to look. It's just a rough, like, okay, they look close enough to accurately holding swords, but eventually, you need to, at least in my personal case, I like to get some reference, taking photos of my own hands with my phone, so that way I can actually see how they should work. So now in the piece, I'm actually back to working on the wind again. It's like, all right, how can I make things look windy? It's like, is there clouds in the sky and whatnot? I'm gonna put a bandana or headband, sorry, on the foreground guy, and maybe I've got some blowing cloth on his clothes, and kind of just trying to see what sticks at this moment. I tend to speed up the video a bit anytime I work on the ground because the ground changes a lot. It's like I wanted to be on a hill, but it's like to what extent I want the ground to look like. Um, Here, I'm actually doing more of closing in the composition on the background guy to make him feel more trapped with extending the sword off the canvas so that way it's like the dude in the background has nowhere to go at this point. You know, the weight of the other guy's sword is down, and there's a really nice point of tension with the sword of the background guy and the forearm of the foreground guy, kind of making a cross. That's like a good point of tension that your eyes are kind of drawn to. But yeah, also when I do these paintings, I I've amassed a decent amount of reference for black and white films and movies. Just older films where they have fancy lighting and where they would fake the lighting, like painting the shadows into things. But it's those are really good to look at when doing these because you can see how much you can drop things into darkness, which is a thing that I go back and forth with a lot. Usually, as I paint, it's like okay, there's a things could be lit like a fair amount, and then as I go, it's like okay, how much lighting can I take away, and one of the main notes I tend to hit is usually that the skin can be pretty light, and then the clothing should be ultimately pretty dark, and it'll usually read a bit better, and especially if you're doing like a light background, have the clothing dark and have the skin maybe be a little light. But if you're doing like a dark background, even sometimes it's like okay, skin's still light, and then maybe the clothing's still dark, where all you can see is the shapes of like the faces and the arms or whatnot. It's kind of cool things to play around with black and white, and also I just love it so much because you can get away with a lot. You don't have to define like every note in a painting, and I mean you don't have to do that anyways, but it kind of trains you to leave things obscure and so the viewer will kind of fill in the blanks a bit. It's like you don't need every every detail on everything, and the fabric sometimes can just be big blobby shapes that um, feel accurate enough but aren't necessarily like exactly how it is. I mean, you want to get it close, but it can you have give to play around with. So here I am reworking this face again. The Just going back with like okay, you learn drawing from drawing. I'm pretty much never happy with it until the end, but it will get there. Um, it's also part of it is trying to figure out the story of this guy. It's like, do I want him to be a younger samurai, an older samurai? I know at one point I make him. You'll see it. I'll make him a bit more of an older guy, and it's like okay, maybe part of the narrative could be that he is gonna die here up on this hill, because the other dude is the new blood, and then this one's like old man. But I'll do it, and then I'll go away with it, or I'll go away from it and bring it back to a more youthful look. At this point, I've decided, all right, I need to get some reference for my hands. I've I think in the room I'm in, I've grabbed like a bottle or something, and which is almost like the shaft of a sword, and took some pictures of how my hand might look holding it. It's not too hard to do if you have a phone. It's probably easier than trying to scour around for reference online. But here you'll get a good feeling of how I go back and forth between the black and white. I'm painting with both black and white with it, and just noodling around and giving it form and rendering a bit. One of the main brushes I use is it's very opaque on one end, and then it has like a fall off towards the other. So it's got a hard edge and a soft edge, and it's great for um, getting these types of things to work. But yeah, since it, you want the hands to look like they're physically holding something, so it's good to have reference for it. Like he's holding a sword, he should look like he has a sword within his hand or within his hands. Otherwise, you're going to get some bizarre results, and it's just not going to look quite right. Not to say that I'm going to land on something that's totally perfect, but working with just black and white, you know, you can lay in just a black shape for how you want it to look, and then go back over it in a little bit of a light shape, and then all of a sudden you have like a 3D looking form there, and it's like, oh, that actually looks pretty good. That's totally serviceable. And that's something I'm drawn to. Speaking of being drawn to things, I think I really started to get into this look specifically um, when I discovered Sergio Topi. So he's one of my favorite artists, Italian comic book guy. He's extremely, or he was extremely good. His work just blows my mind. He's definitely worth checking out. And then obviously like manga, like Akira, you know, that book's amazing. It's silly because everybody talks about it all the time, but it is really good. It's a good book to read too. It's got a cool story. Art's amazing. But yeah, Sergio Topi's kind of my jam. I definitely take a lot of influence from him with his distortion of proportions, and just shit looks so accurate too. It's quite amazing. Speaking of distortion, kind of just distorting this hand a little bit just to get it to feel right. I realized that as I was looking at it, it's like, oh, for how the hand's holding the sword, there wasn't enough room around the thumb. Like the thumb didn't feel like it had any mass to it. So kind of fixing that to make it look like the thumb is a 3D shape and it is grabbing onto that sword. But yeah, going back to the clothing on the background guy, still kind of trying to figure out how it's going to be flapping in the wind and blowing around. It's not it's not great. I'm like, it looks wrong. It looks weird, but I'm okay with it. Kind of keep chugging along. It's the learn drawing from drawing sort of thing. Pulling the sleeves back, getting more arm in there. I definitely noodle around with it a lot. And here's when I'm like, okay, let's start working on making him look like a more senior aged person. So lightening up some of the eyebrows, mustache stuff. But then as I go on, I eventually realize there's just not enough contrast in it because he's in the background. At least for how I handled it, there's not enough contrast in it. So I'll go away from that. So this is basically a demo on how to paint crappy faces. If you're into that, I'll paint a number of crappy faces until it eventually clicks, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is how you should do it. Speeding up through some background stuff, just doing some mixer brush stuff on the ground. It's a really great tool. I'll probably put that in another little video of how I use my brushes. My apologies for how much this thing zooms around. I get like, yeah, it's kind of spastic. I zoom in and a lot, zoom in and out a lot, and yeah, it's obnoxious. Sorry about that. But yeah, at this point, I've decided like, okay, let's do away with the hill in the background and just do some foreground grass. you know, like maybe they're at the top of the hill. I'm trying to put some debris in the scene. You know, get the more wind motion, and I was trying to get the grass to blow or to look like it's blowing in the wind. Like everything's blowing towards the background guy and towards the right, so that compositionally everything kind of leads you to him. Working on his face again. This is where I've realized that it needs the contrast for his facial features to be legible, you know, and to also give it that kind of graphic look. And this is kind of just how I go about it. It's how much light shapes do I want in there, how much darkness, and then just repeatedly working back in to find that balance. You know, it's like I put pattern on it, on his Hakama a bit there, trying to get his belt to read well. But then I'm also like, all right, is the pattern too obnoxious? You know, because it when doing black and white, it can get very noisy. You know, even just like a small amount of black and white going back and forth, it could just get all over the place. I'm still wrestling on this with, all right, I've got the scarf in there and it's blowing in the wind. It's like, is is it gonna read enough? And I'll come back to that eventually. So I decided to ditch working on him, and I'm like, all right, let's work on this other hand. Let's get that too. Look good. So I grabbed some reference. This is gonna look pretty weird for a bit. It's gonna be totally fine though. But I realized that yeah, hand can't bend like that. So let's work it out a little better. Anatomically, his his arm is close to like pretty close to being fudged when where it ends up where it actually is, in comparison to how his clothing is sitting on his body. But with the intention of having the wind and like a big baggy thing, I think where it ends up is totally okay. And sometimes it's cool to do this like selection and moving things. It can give you some like neat little artifact stuff. Like some of the lines that are appearing on the arm are all there just totally because I was selecting things and moving stuff around, just trying to make it look right. It's the realization right there that the sword is, or the whatever it's called, the thing you put the sword in, the holder. Um, it wasn't sitting right in his hand. His hand couldn't actually bend like that, so I had to move it. But it's also kind of creating a like point of like strength. Like he's like it's like anchoring him in the ground by having it tilted like that. You know, because his posture and everything is almost making the shape of a V. You know, on top of him kind of owning the entire canvas and being like arms out, like pretty much blocking off the other guy. So here it's trying to get the light and dark shapes right again. It's like how much darkness, how much light. And in the beginning, it's like I put in just like dark and light shapes all over the place. I kind of just squiggle things in, knowing that eventually I am going to change it and it's not going to stay there for the entire piece. You know, sometimes it's better to actually just put marks down, and if you're trying to learn how to draw or get better at it, it's better to put marks down and get over your fear of drawing and just get something on the canvas, because you learn drawing from drawing. You can look at it, you can see what's potentially wrong with it, put another layer on top of it, start working it out again, start improving it. You know, and not every not every mark you put down is going to be right, you know? I mean, maybe for some guys who are really freaking good, but just look at my times of repainting this face. I'm back fixating on that same face again. And I was trying to figure out, all right, where should his eyes be looking? Is this right? I put goofy teeth on it for a second. Here I just started spastically going through the layers that I painted, trying to see what would stick. You know, which is just part of my process. It's like it doesn't always happen, but you know, it's like painting faces. I don't always paint bad faces, but when I do, it's during a demo. But that's okay, you know. So still working on his features, still working on his clothing, but eventually getting sick of the guy in the background and okay, let's move on to the foreground guy again. Doing a bit more on his headband, trying to get that to feel like it's blowing in the wind a bit. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's blowing in the wind right now, but it'll get there. And then also just knocking back stuff on him. It's like how much darkness can I get away with having on it, and then getting those like small hints of light here and there. And now I'm kind of working on tattering his clothing a little bit. It's like feeling pretty good about where his clothing is. Like, okay, I can start putting some patterns on some actual like identifying things, like emblems and whatnot. It's like they don't have to be perfect. It's better if they're not perfect. You know, when you want to slop them up a bit, make it look like this guy's actually worn this for a while. And what happened there is I went and worked on the sword a little bit, and it was close enough to the background guy's head that I got fixated on the head again, and I started working on it again. Oh my god! But that's all right. It happens. Ah, here's where things start to improve on the background guy a bit. Moving the eyes up. I liked the feel of that. His eyes felt like they were too close to the nose anyway. So proportionally, it was just a little weird. All right, thinking back on the wind, I'm like, I need more stuff blowing around in the background. So I make a small shape. Could be blades of grass. Could just be like leafy things or whatever. And then just use the mixer brush and paint it all over the place. Get more movement in there. You know, it helps the piece overall. And then just distorting it to make it look like it's all blowing in a specific, in like within a 3D space. It's an easy trick. It's cool. Still trying to figure out how much light and dark I can have on the background guy's face. I know it's like his face doesn't have enough darkness on it right now. So one of the things I think that generally makes these pieces, these black and white images look weird, is if there isn't a certain amount of value and contrast on it. Like my intention with these is never to just ink straight up and do line work. That's not a aesthetic that I'm going for. So I always want there to be like a gradation in like light to dark. Like it can happen like in a pretty short space or short distance, you know. But I want there to be some rendering on it. So one of the things that has bugged me, or had been bugging me on it, is that I couldn't get the background guy's face to feel right with having the darkness on it. Whereas the foreground guy, he's got like a deep shadow happening on his cheek and everything, and I feel like it just looks right. I like it. and that's something I try to know, like the arms and hands. I'm cool with that and everything. And I'm just like, all right, how the heck am I going to get this face to look right? So going with the light and dark, I'm like, maybe I can hide more of his face in darkness. So I play around with putting like some big shadow with the clothing. And at this point, I know I'm like, all right, the clothing's not working. Why am I sticking with it so much? But it's something that you don't want to be a slave to your piece entirely. It's like if something's not working, you want to fix it. So, and the same thing goes for with getting fixated on something. I definitely got fixated a number of times on the face, but within reason, kept working around on other parts of it. Here, I'm trying to get some foreground grass to just help with the depth and help the scene be dynamic. Also keeping with the wind. Wind helps things look dynamic. Everything's kind of like moving around. The clothing's moving. The grass is moving. The wind's blowing up leaves and stuff. The hair is moving. It's all those things that make a piece come to life. You know, it's like physics. You want things to be affected by some amount of like physics in a piece. It's like if you were painting somebody riding a dragon, you want them to look like they're holding onto the dragon, like the dragon has force and inertia that's pulling the person hard. You know, it's like if you've ever been out seeing somebody walking a big dog and they're holding the leash and the dog takes off running and it could like dislocate your shoulder. It's kind of like that. You just want push and pull and in life. It's like whatever. It's good notes to have in your paintings. Still playing around with that background guy. What's gonna happen to him? Back to the grass. Trying to find the right values in the grass. It's like what is the level of noise that is acceptable that'll make it so the piece will still read. All right, I just sped it up a ton there. It was just going back and forth between the layers, looking at what I had originally and what I had done, and trying to figure out like, okay, what I like, what I don't like. I believe here's where it starts to click. While looking at how I painted the other guy in Deep Shadow, I make another go at getting the lighting to feel a bit more contrasty and dynamic on his face. Because it needs to have those light hits. You need to be able to see his cheekbone and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that feels pretty good. Now I can start working on the hair and working around a little bit. You know, scuffing up his clothing a little bit, making it look a bit more tattered. Maybe you know, he's been around the block quite a while in this gear. Yeah, and since it is a sword fight, um, maybe this is like in between the clanging of their weaponry. So I'm gonna eventually start to put some blood on his arms and on his face a bit. But I'm back toiling around with the clothing, trying to get it to look right. But it's like I know the clothing doesn't look right, and I know that the collar and the scarf are creating a massive problem, and I'll eventually fix that. Like at this point, I'm happy with the face. I think it looks solid. It looks good. Now I can start adding in some other details. So here's putting blood on the arm, you know, and getting some blood on the face. Make it look like that, you know, he's been through some crap. Maybe he's already been slashed by this other guy. Maybe he tripped and fell and hit his head on the way to the fight. Who knows? But it makes you wonder. It's like, oh, what's this? What's the deal? You know? And here's where I just delete that stuff to give him an actual collar and fix the scarf and make it look better or more readable. And I delete the top part of the scarf that was going behind the sword because I wanted him to feel even more trapped and isolated underneath the weight of the other guy's sword. So it's like the only thing that is breaking through the composition of the foreground guy is the sword of the background guy, but everything else is stuck beneath the sword. You know, so it's like he's got a lot of weight on him right now. How's he gonna defeat this other guy? So now it's trying to figure out the light and dark shapes of the grass, and I eventually ended up like I painted it in a lot of black, and then I was like, oh, you know what? Let me invert that, and inverting it gave me kind of the result I wanted, where I had a decent amount of contrast going against the guy in the background, and now it'll be just doing some finishing details, making sure that sword doesn't look just like a rectangle on the handle, getting the part of the guard, the suba, to not just look like some blobby bendy shape. Which a good way of doing that is making a flat shape and then distorting it and then just copying it a whole bunch over, which will give it like a little bit of thickness, and you can use that thickness to you know, create your edge. I mean, it's not perfect, but it works. Just trying to get the lighting to look good enough on it, you know. It's just a lot of back and forth with these. Where do you put your darks? Where do you put your lights? You know, like any painting. But this is my general process for any black and white stuff I do. I actually accidentally stopped recording there for a bit and did some more headband stuff on the foreground guy, so my apologies that that's not in there. It just magically appeared. So, and then that's the final painting.